What does it mean to solve the universe? Most people spend their entire lives searching for answers in books, in philosophies, in religions, in endless distractions. Yet 2,000 years ago, a man sat down each night, in the silence of his tent on the battlefield, or in the solitude of his chamber in Rome, and he wrote, not for the public, not for fame, but for himself. His name was Marcus Aurelius, emperor, warrior, philosopher. And somehow, amidst war, plague, betrayal, and the crushing weight of ruling the most powerful empire on earth, he managed to find peace within. He didn't solve the stars, he didn't solve mathematics, he didn't solve the mysteries of physics. He solved something greater. He solved the human struggle with existence itself. He solved the universe as it appears in the heart and the mind of every person who suffers, who doubts, who fears. And tonight, you and I will walk through 10 timeless lessons from Marcus Aurelius. Lessons that are not just words carved in ancient manuscripts, but weapons for the modern mind. Tools to endure stress, to navigate anxiety, to face betrayal, to conquer chaos. These are not abstract theories. These are battle-tested truths forged in fire, war, and sleepless nights under the weight of the crown. But here is the question you must ask yourself. If Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by death, surrounded by uncertainty, surrounded by pressures no modern leader could imagine, if he could remain calm, rational, and unbroken, what excuse do we have today? We complain of traffic, we lose control in arguments, we spiral into despair at setbacks. And yet, here was a man holding the fate of millions in his hands, who still managed to say, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that. The Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, admitting that all his armies, his wealth, his influence could not give him true control. True control lay only in the mind. He knew that the universe outside him was chaos, unpredictable, often cruel. But the universe within him, his reason, his choices, his discipline, that was his kingdom. That was the universe he solved. And in this journey, you will discover what it means to do the same. You will discover how to live with unshakable clarity in a world that constantly tries to break you. You will learn the 10 lessons Marcus Aurelius carved into his soul, lessons you can carry into your job, your relationships, your failures, and your victories. Lessons that will outlast every temporary pleasure, every fleeting worry. Let me promise you something. By the end of this video, you will not only understand Marcus Aurelius better, you will understand yourself better. You will carry with you tools to face whatever life throws your way. And I want you to stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson we uncover is the most powerful of all. It is the teaching that Marcus himself leaned on in his darkest moments, the teaching that can anchor you when everything else collapses. But before we dive into those lessons, I want you to pause for a second. Ask yourself, what is it that you really want? Do you want control over the external world, or do you want mastery over yourself? Because Marcus Aurelius teaches us that the two are not the same, and only one of them leads to freedom. This is the story of a man who had everything, power, riches, armies, and yet turned inward, choosing wisdom over indulgence, discipline over luxury, character over comfort. This is the story of Marcus Aurelius, the man who solved the universe. And now, as you listen, I invite you to engage, take part in this reflection. Leave a comment with this phrase, simple yet profound: control the mind. Let it be your reminder that no matter what happens outside, the inner universe is yours to govern. Lesson 10, the final anchor. You control your response. What does it mean to hold final power over yourself? What does it mean to face the universe with nothing left but your own mind? Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome and the philosopher king, reached this truth in the deepest hours of his reign. Surrounded by plague, by war, by betrayal, by the endless decay of human ambition, he discovered that there was only one anchor strong enough to resist the storm of existence. That anchor was not wealth, not armies, not fame, not fortune. The final anchor was the realization that you cannot control the universe, but you can always control your response. This truth, repeated through his meditations, was not a poetic phrase for comfort. It was a survival tool. Imagine the Emperor of Rome carrying the weight of millions of lives, aware every day that new disasters awaited him at dawn. He knew that the plague could not be stopped by his commands. He knew that death would not spare him because of his crown. He knew that soldiers would desert, politicians would plot, loved ones would die. But he also knew this. No matter what happened outside, no one could dictate how he chose to meet it. That was his kingdom, and no one could take it. It is tempting to dismiss this as ancient wisdom, locked in the pages of time. But pause and think of your own life. How often do you hand away control of your mind? When someone insults you, do you not give them your peace by responding with rage? When a plan collapses, do you not surrender your stability to frustration? When fortune denies you what you expected, do you not bow to despair? Each time you hand over the one thing Marcus fought to protect, the sovereignty of your response. This lesson is simple to hear and difficult to live, because we are conditioned to believe that control lies outside us. We believe happiness is found in possessions, status, recognition, circumstances. We measure ourselves against events, not against our response to them. But Marcus teaches that this is a fatal illusion. You cannot own what you cannot command. The only true possession is your mind. The only true mastery is mastery of self. Imagine for a moment the plague of Rome in the 2nd century. Cities overwhelmed with sickness, bodies piling in the streets, fear spreading faster than the disease itself. Citizens looked to Marcus for hope, for guidance, for stability. What could he offer? He could not heal the sick, he could not stop the dying, but he could show by his example that one thing remains untouched by fate: the way we choose to meet it. That is why his writings survived, because they do not promise escape from suffering, they promise strength within it. And here is where the modern soul must listen carefully. You live in a different world, but the chaos is the same. The storms are digital, economic, social, emotional, but the structure of suffering has not changed. You face betrayals, failures, anxieties, and disappointments. And in those moments, you are tempted to say, "I have no control." But Marcus whispers across time, "You always have control. You control your judgment. You control your choices. You control your response. The world may strike, but you decide whether to bow or to stand." Think of a time when someone insulted you. The words themselves are only sounds, nothing more than vibrations in the air. Yet if you let them wound you, you create your own suffering. The words do not contain pain. Your judgment of them does. That is what Marcus practiced daily. He separated events from interpretations, facts from feelings. The insult exists, but its power depends on you. The failure exists, but its destruction depends on you. The hardship exists, but its defeat depends on you. In this, you are not a victim. You are the ruler of the one realm that matters. But how do we live this? How do we train ourselves to remember in the heat of pain that our response is still ours to command? Marcus practiced by writing. Every night he returned to his journal, speaking to himself as a student, not as an emperor. He reminded himself again and again, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Notice the discipline. He did not assume that knowing the truth once was enough. He rehearsed it daily. He wrote it until it became muscle memory of the soul. You can do the same. Each morning, remind yourself, I cannot control the universe, but I can control my response. When something shakes you, pause. Do not hand over your mind immediately. Ask, is this within my control? If not, release it. If yes, act with reason, not impulse. Then choose the response that reflects your character, not your fear. This is not about denial, it is about clarity. The storm still rages, but the captain holds the wheel. Marcus Aurelius did not solve the stars. He did not solve mathematics. He did not solve the mysteries of the cosmos. He solved the inner universe of the human being, and that is why he remains the man who solved the universe. Because to solve your response is to solve everything. Life becomes bearable, even beautiful, when you no longer demand control of what is not yours. You release yourself from slavery to fortune. You step into freedom, the kind that cannot be taken by death, by pain, by betrayal. So here, at the end of his lessons, we arrive at the one truth that carries all others. You control your response. No one else does. Not the enemy, not the friend, not the stranger, not the storm, not even fate. They may press upon you with all their weight, but they cannot command your mind unless you open the gates. Keep the gates shut. Rule your inner world. Be sovereign over yourself. This is the final challenge Marcus leaves us. Will you surrender your mind to every event, or will you hold it like a fortress, calm, disciplined, unbroken? The answer is not found in words, but in practice, moment by moment, day by day, choice by choice. And when you fail, and you will fail, do as Marcus did. Return to the page, return to reflection, remind yourself again. Because freedom is not won once, it is guarded every hour. And now I invite you to seal this truth within yourself. Do not just listen, do not just nod, declare it. Leave a comment with the phrase, I choose my response. Let those words become your anchor. Let them remind you that no matter what storm rises outside, you are still the captain within. That is the lesson Marcus Aurelius lived. That is the anchor that held him in plague, in war, in betrayal, in loss, and that is the anchor that can hold you now. Lesson 9. Endurance in the face of suffering. What is a life without hardship? What is a character that has never been tested by fire? Marcus Aurelius knew that suffering was not an interruption to life, but part of its very essence. As emperor, he could have surrounded himself with luxury, drowned himself in distractions, or shielded himself from discomfort. Instead, he faced storms of unimaginable scale. He endured plague that wiped out entire communities. He endured betrayal from those closest to him. He endured endless wars on the borders of his empire. He endured the slow decline of health that reminded him every day of mortality. And in all of this, Marcus Aurelius never asked to be spared from suffering. He asked only for the strength to endure it well. To endure does not mean to become numb, nor to deny pain, nor to pretend that life is easier than it is. Endurance, in the Stoic sense, means to accept suffering as part of the order of the universe, to carry it without resentment, to refuse to be broken by it. When Marcus sat in his tent on the Danube frontier, writing by dim light after hours of war and negotiation, he reminded himself that pain and loss were not curses, but conditions of existence. He wrote not for others, but for himself, rehearsing the discipline that would allow him to endure the next blow. His private words became lessons for the world. Life will strike you, but your response defines you. Look at your own life. Have you not faced moments when suffering seemed unbearable? A loss that tore you apart, a failure that made you doubt your worth, an illness that drained your hope, a betrayal that shattered your trust. In those moments, endurance is the difference between ruin and resilience. Without endurance, the mind collapses under weight. With endurance, the same weight becomes training, forging the soul into something unshakable. But here lies the paradox Marcus understood. Endurance is not passive. It is not simply waiting for pain to end. It is an active choice, a deliberate stand. To endure is to say, I cannot control what has come upon me, but I will not allow it to poison my character. I will not allow it to turn me bitter, cowardly, or unjust. The external world may wound me, but it cannot command the quality of my soul. That belongs to me. Consider how easily we in modern life collapse under far smaller pressures. A delayed flight, a harsh comment online, a disappointment at work, and already we despair, already we lose patience, already we surrender our calm. Marcus would ask, if you cannot endure these small trials, how will you face the great ones? If an emperor of Rome could endure plague and betrayal, what excuse do we have to fall apart at traffic or criticism? Endurance is not about waiting for life to be easy. It is about becoming strong enough for life as it is. Marcus knew that endurance was not endless. The body grows weak, illness consumes strength, death comes for all. But until the final breath, the soul can choose. He wrote, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." Endurance begins in the mind. Pain exists, but the story we attach to it multiplies or diminishes it. Endurance refuses to add despair to suffering. Endurance chooses clarity instead of chaos. Think of a soldier on the frontier, wounded but alive, cold but breathing, afraid but still holding the line. That soldier's endurance does not erase pain. It transforms it into strength, because every moment endured is proof of inner sovereignty. Marcus was emperor, yet he trained himself to think like that soldier. He knew that crowns and riches do not exempt anyone from pain. The only advantage they give is the chance to practice endurance with dignity, and he took that chance every day. Now translate this to your world. When you lose a job, can you endure without collapsing into self-pity? When your heart is broken, can you endure without surrendering to bitterness? When illness strikes, can you endure without drowning in fear? To endure is not to pretend the pain is small. It is to affirm that your spirit is larger. The Stoic does not seek suffering, but when suffering arrives, he treats it as an opportunity to practice virtue. Courage, patience, resilience, these grow only in the soil of hardship. Without trials, these virtues remain words. With trials, they become reality. Endurance is not glamorous, it is not celebrated in the moment. Often it is silent, hidden, unrecognized. Marcus endured in silence, writing only to himself, never expecting the world to see his reflections. Yet those private exercises of endurance became the foundation of a philosophy that survives 2 millennia later. What you endure now in silence may one day echo beyond your life. Your endurance may strengthen others, even without words. And remember this, endurance is not about waiting forever. Marcus Aurelius did not endure blindly. He acted when he could, fought when necessary, changed what was within his power. But when faced with the immovable, he chose not despair, but endurance. That is the distinction. To fight the unwinnable battle against reality is waste. To endure reality with dignity is wisdom. So when suffering comes to you, and it will, remember Marcus. Remember the emperor who lived not in palaces of ease, but in fields of struggle, who knew that suffering is not the enemy, but the forge. Endure not with bitterness, but with strength. Endure not by cursing fate, but by living in harmony with it. Endure not to prove yourself to others, but to preserve the sovereignty of your own soul. And if you wish to carry this truth into your daily life, practice now. The next time you are tested by frustration, pause. Do not let impulse own you. Whisper to yourself, "This is my training." Endure. The next time disappointment strikes, breathe. Do not surrender your peace. Say to yourself, "This is the forge of my character." Endure. With each practice, endurance becomes less a burden and more a shield, until finally, like Marcus, you can look upon life with calm eyes and meet every blow with strength. And now, as you finish this reflection, I invite you to make this your own. Do not only hear the words of Marcus Aurelius, live them, write them into your mind, and seal them with a declaration that endures beyond this moment. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I will endure." Let it be your anchor, your reminder, your practice, for in endurance lies the path to freedom, and in freedom lies the true mastery of life. Lesson 8. The power of perspective. What separates those who collapse under the weight of life from those who rise stronger? What separates despair from resilience, weakness from strength, slavery from freedom? Marcus Aurelius believed the difference was not in external events, but in perspective. Perspective is the lens through which we interpret the universe. Change the lens, and the universe itself changes. The plague does not change, war does not change, betrayal does not change, but the meaning we assign to them, the judgment we attach, transforms our experience entirely. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, endured war, plague, and betrayal. And yet he did not call himself cursed. He called himself a student of life. He believed every challenge was material for the soul's growth, every misfortune a chance to practice virtue, every insult a test of patience. Perspective was his weapon against chaos. Imagine Marcus seated in his tent on the Danube frontier. Outside, the night is filled with the cries of soldiers, the whispers of fear, the endless uncertainty of war. Inside, he sits alone with his journal. He does not record complaints. He does not write speeches for the Senate. He does not fill the page with despair. Instead, he writes to himself reminders of perspective. He tells himself that death is not evil, that pain is not unbearable, that fortune is not owed to him. He reminds himself that the universe is vast, that his own life is a brief spark, that what seems unbearable today will fade into the ocean of time. This practice of perspective allowed him to endure what others could not. He did not change the events, he changed his interpretation. Now consider your own life. When someone insults you, your instinct may be to feel wounded, to take the words as an attack on your worth. But perspective asks you to pause. What are words? Mere sounds in the air. Do they define your value? Only if you decide they do. When plans fail, you may see disaster. Perspective offers another lens. Is this not an opportunity to adapt, to learn, to test your resilience? When fortune denies you what you expected, you may call it unfair. Perspective asks, was it ever promised to you? Why demand what the universe never guaranteed? Perspective is not denial, it is clarity. It is the art of seeing events as they are without the added weight of unnecessary judgment. Marcus Aurelius trained this perspective daily. He reminded himself that the universe is change and our life is opinion. Think about those words. The universe is change, meaning nothing remains fixed. To resist this truth is to fight the nature of existence itself. Our life is opinion, meaning our suffering or peace depends not on events, but on the lens we apply to them. This is the great reversal Marcus offers us. Happiness is not the product of fortune, but of perspective. Modern life proves this again and again. Two people face the same challenge. One collapses, one grows. The difference is not the event, but the perspective. One sees tragedy, the other sees training. One sees injustice, the other sees opportunity. One sees loss, the other sees freedom from attachment. Marcus Aurelius would say, "It is not the thing that disturbs you, but your judgment of it. That is where power lies." But perspective is not automatic. The human mind, left unchecked, falls into despair, resentment, self-pity. Perspective must be trained like a muscle. That is why Marcus wrote his Meditations, not to teach the world, but to teach himself, to rehearse the truth until it became unshakable. Every line was an exercise in perspective. Every reminder was a shield against distortion. He wrote so that when life struck, he would remember, this is not evil, this is not unbearable, this is not permanent. It is only perspective that gives it such weight, and perspective is mine to command. Consider how this applies to you. When you wake to bad news, when you lose what you thought was secure, when someone betrays your trust, you have a choice. You can view it as disaster, or you can view it as material for patience, for wisdom, for resilience. The same event, two perspectives, two entirely different lives. Perspective does not erase pain, but it transforms the relationship to it. And transformation is freedom. Marcus Aurelius was emperor, but in his heart he was a student of perspective. He knew that the world outside could never be mastered completely, but the world within always could. This is why his writings survive while empires fall, because perspective is timeless. The plague of Rome is not the plague of today, but suffering is suffering, loss is loss, betrayal is betrayal, and the same medicine heals across centuries, the shift of perspective. So let us practice as Marcus did. When hardship comes, ask, what perspective serves me here? When loss comes, ask, what perspective frees me from despair? When fear comes, ask, what perspective restores my courage? In every moment you are given the chance to choose a lens, and in that choice lies your strength. Perspective is not about blind optimism. Marcus did not deny the pain of life. He did not close his eyes to suffering. He saw it fully, accepted it fully, and yet refused to give it power beyond what was real. That is true perspective. Not the refusal to see, but the refusal to distort. The world may bring suffering, but you decide if it becomes destruction. The world may bring insult, but you decide if it becomes injury. The world may bring failure, but you decide if it becomes final. Think of the universe as a vast storm. You cannot stop the storm, but you can decide whether to see it as chaos or as training. You cannot stop the waves, but you can decide whether to curse them or to learn to sail. Perspective transforms obstacles into teachers, pain into practice, endings into beginnings. This is why Marcus Aurelius could write in calm, even while Rome burned, because perspective made him sovereign over the one realm that mattered, his own mind. And now I invite you to practice this with me. Do not wait for life to spare you from hardship. That day will never come. Instead, when hardship arrives, meet it with perspective. Remember Marcus, seated alone in his tent, reminding himself that the universe is change and life is opinion. Remember that you too can choose. And seal this truth with action. Leave a comment with the phrase, I choose perspective. Let it be your declaration, your reminder, your shield, for perspective is the power that frees you, and in freedom lies the wisdom Marcus Aurelius carried to his final days. Lesson 7. The strength of virtue. What is the foundation of a good life? What is the compass that does not fail in storms, the fortress that cannot be breached, the anchor that does not drift? For Marcus Aurelius, it was virtue, not wealth, not reputation, not comfort, not power, but virtue. The Stoics believed that virtue alone is sufficient for happiness, and Marcus carried this truth into every decision as emperor and as a man. To him, virtue was not abstract. It was the living strength that guided action, preserved dignity, and gave meaning even to suffering. Virtue, as Marcus practiced it, was not about empty morality or public image. It was about aligning his soul with the order of nature, living in harmony with reason, and refusing to be corrupted by the chaos of the world. He understood that the empire could fall, fortune could vanish, health could deteriorate, but if he held on to virtue, he still possessed the highest good. This is why, amidst war, betrayal, and plague, Marcus repeated to himself reminders not to let anger, greed, or fear corrupt his character. He knew the greatest victory was not over enemies or rivals, but over himself. Consider his position. He ruled the most powerful empire on earth, yet he did not drown in luxury or arrogance. He reminded himself daily that he was only a man, that he too would die, that the crown was borrowed from fate and could be taken at any moment. Surrounded by flatterers, he guarded against vanity. Surrounded by wealth, he guarded against indulgence. Surrounded by betrayal, he guarded against hatred. This discipline required strength greater than any army. It required the strength of virtue. Now consider your life. Do you measure yourself by what you own, by what others think, by temporary victories? Or do you measure yourself by the quality of your character? The world tempts you constantly to abandon virtue for comfort, to trade integrity for advantage, to surrender patience for rage. But Marcus would remind you, none of these trades will bring peace. Only virtue secures peace, because only virtue cannot be stolen. Fortune can betray you, but virtue remains. Enemies can wound you, but virtue remains. Death can approach, but virtue remains. Virtue for the Stoics had 4 pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Marcus practiced each as a daily struggle. Wisdom to see the world clearly without illusion. Courage to act rightly even when afraid. Justice to treat others fairly, regardless of circumstance. Temperance to restrain desire and live in balance. These were not ideals written on stone, but living practices forged in difficulty. When plague struck, wisdom told him not to despair at what could not be controlled. When war threatened, courage told him to lead with calm instead of panic. When betrayal arrived, justice told him not to answer hatred with hatred. When temptation whispered, temperance told him enough was enough. Virtue was his shield against the chaos of existence. In modern life, we still face the same choices. Wisdom when information overwhelms us. Courage when fear holds us back. Justice when selfishness tempts us to exploit others. Temperance when excess calls us to indulge without restraint. These choices may seem small, but together they shape a life. Virtue is not practiced once. It is practiced every day, in every decision, in silence, when no one is watching. That is why Marcus wrote his reflections in private, not for an audience, but for himself. He knew that virtue is forged in the hidden places of the soul, not in the applause of crowds. Think of the temptations you face. The temptation to lie when truth costs too much. The temptation to hate when forgiveness seems weak. The temptation to indulge when discipline feels heavy. Each time, you stand at the same crossroads Marcus faced. And each time, your choice determines whether you build strength or weakness. To choose virtue is difficult. To abandon it is easy. But only the difficult path leads to freedom. Marcus wrote that a man's worth is measured by the things he pursues. If you pursue comfort, you will be fragile. If you pursue wealth, you will be enslaved by it. If you pursue reputation, you will be bound by the judgment of others. But if you pursue virtue, you will be unshakable, because virtue is within your command. It does not depend on chance, on fortune, or on the opinions of the world. It depends only on your will. That is why it is strength. Virtue is not grand speeches or heroic gestures. It is in the patience to listen when you want to interrupt. It is in the courage to admit fault when pride resists. It is in the justice of treating others with fairness when selfishness whispers otherwise. It is in the temperance of saying no to excess when desire burns. These small acts, practiced daily, shape a character that no storm can bend. Marcus Aurelius did not become a philosopher king by accident. He became one by practicing virtue in each moment, by guarding his character more fiercely than his empire. And here lies the lesson for us. You may not rule Rome, but you rule yourself. You may not command armies, but you command your choices. You may not write decrees, but you write your character through every action. Virtue is the empire you can always govern, and if you govern it well, no external chaos can overthrow you. Marcus died as every man dies. His power ended, his crown passed, his empire changed, but his virtue remains, echoing across centuries, speaking still to us today. That is the strength of virtue. It outlasts wealth, power, fame, and pleasure. It is the one treasure that death cannot take. So now, as you hear his words through mine, do not let them remain abstract. Make them practical. Ask yourself, in this moment, what does virtue require of me? Does it require patience, honesty, courage, restraint? Then practice it, and when you fail, return again tomorrow. For virtue is not perfection, but persistence. And let us seal this lesson with a declaration. Leave a comment with the phrase, "Virtue is my strength." Let it be your reminder that in a world of shifting fortune, virtue alone remains unshakable. Hold to it, as Marcus did, and you too will stand firm against the storms of existence. Lesson 6. The calm within chaos. Life in Rome under Marcus Aurelius was anything but calm. The empire was stretched to its limits. At its borders, tribes threatened war. Within its walls, political intrigue corroded trust. Over it all, the Antonine Plague spread terror, reducing strong cities into places of mourning. And in the center of this storm stood Marcus Aurelius, emperor, general, husband, father, philosopher. To rule an empire of such size in such times required strength, but not the kind of strength the world usually praises. It required calm. The calm that is not the absence of noise, but the ability to remain unmoved by it. The calm that is not the denial of chaos, but the refusal to let chaos govern the mind. Marcus did not inherit peace, he inherited crisis. He did not choose comfort, he chose responsibility. And yet, in his writings, in the pages of his meditations, we do not hear the voice of a desperate man overwhelmed by the storms of fate. We hear the voice of a man who cultivated calm in the midst of chaos. He repeated to himself again and again that external events are beyond command, that the universe is change, and that the mind is always free to remain steady. His empire might collapse, but his inner world would not. That was his victory. Think of your own life. You may not rule Rome, but you know chaos. The phone buzzing with demands, the pressure of deadlines, the unexpected crises that arrive without warning, the betrayals that wound, the anxieties that gnaw at your peace. Chaos surrounds you as it surrounded Marcus, and like him you are given the same choice, to surrender your calm to the storm or to hold it as an anchor. Calm is not a gift, it is a discipline. It is the training of the mind to remain sovereign when the world demands surrender. The mistake we often make is to imagine calm as something we find when chaos ends. We think, once I solve this problem, then I will be calm. Once the stress disappears, then I will be calm. But Marcus knew the truth. Chaos never ends. One storm passes and another arrives. If calm depends on the absence of storms, we will never know it. True calm is found not after the storm, but within it. It is the ability to stand firm while the winds rage, to breathe while others suffocate, to act with reason when others panic. Marcus practiced this calm daily. Each morning he reminded himself that he would meet arrogance, ingratitude, deceit, selfishness. Each evening he reminded himself that fortune could take everything, even life itself. By rehearsing these truths, he disarmed surprise. Chaos could not shake him because he expected it. He entered each day as a soldier enters battle, ready, composed, resolved. And when chaos arrived, he remembered. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgment of them. Change the judgment, and calm is preserved. Consider how powerful this practice is for modern life. When traffic traps you, you can rage, or you can accept that time is beyond your control. When insult strikes you, you can retaliate, or you can see it as empty sound. When crisis enters your life, you can despair, or you can say, "This too is material for virtue." In every case, calm is not given by circumstance, but chosen by response. That is why Marcus could say, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Calm is not passive. It is strength disciplined into stillness, and calm is contagious. Soldiers watched Marcus on campaign, seeing their emperor endure hardship without complaint, and they themselves grew steadier. Citizens saw their emperor walk through plague without panic, and they themselves gained courage. Calm spreads because it is rare. In a world that worships noise, the one who is calm becomes a beacon. And you too, in your family, in your work, in your circle of influence, can become that beacon. By holding calm when others lose it, you show that chaos need not own us. But calm is not easy. It requires training. It requires daily reminders, the kind Marcus gave himself in his writings. It requires the discipline to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to see clearly before judging. It requires the humility to admit that most things are beyond control, and the wisdom to focus only on what belongs to you, your thoughts, your actions, your choices. And in this practice, calm grows stronger. Imagine the calm of Marcus on his deathbed. The plague that had consumed his empire finally touched him too. He knew his time had come. Yet those who were there said he met death with peace, with composure, with calm. Because for him, death was not chaos, it was nature, and nature was nothing to fear. To the last breath, Marcus held the calm that he had practiced all his life. This is the kind of calm we are called to practice. A calm so deep that not even death can disturb it. Now think of the storms in your life. Some are small, some are crushing. You cannot stop them, but you can meet them with calm. Calm does not solve every problem, but it allows you to face problems with clarity. Calm does not erase pain, but it prevents pain from becoming despair. Calm does not end chaos, but it ensures chaos does not end you. This is the calm Marcus Aurelius practiced, the calm that made him not only an emperor of Rome, but an emperor of himself. So let us carry this lesson. Let us remember that calm is not the absence of chaos, but the strength to remain unmoved within it. Let us practice it daily, as Marcus did in small things and in great. And let us seal this truth with action. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I choose calm." Let it be your anchor, your reminder, your discipline. For when calm lives within you, no chaos outside can rule you. Lesson 5. Freedom from desire. Marcus Aurelius ruled the wealthiest empire of his age. Gold filled his coffers, treasures poured in from every conquered land, slaves and servants attended his every need. He could have drowned himself in excess, in pleasure, in indulgence. Yet in his meditations he warned himself daily against the trap of desire. Why? Because Marcus understood a truth that most of humanity never sees. The more we chase desire, the more enslaved we become. Freedom does not lie in satisfying every craving. Freedom lies in being able to say no. Desire whispers endlessly. It promises happiness in the next possession, the next achievement, the next indulgence. But Marcus saw clearly that desire has no end. One craving satisfied only births another. One pleasure fades and leaves behind emptiness. One indulgence becomes habit, and habit becomes slavery. The man who cannot restrain his desires is not free, even if he sits on a throne. The man who rules himself is free, even if he owns nothing. This was the paradox Marcus lived. Emperor of Rome, yet constantly reminding himself that true power was not in ruling others, but in ruling his own appetites. Think of your own life. How many times have you told yourself, "If only I had this, then I would be happy"? And when you got it, How long did the happiness last? A new phone, a promotion, a relationship, a luxury. Each feels sweet at first, but soon the craving returns, demanding more. Desire is never satisfied. It is a fire that grows the more it is fed. Marcus understood this and chose another path. He practiced temperance, he practiced self-restraint, he practiced freedom from desire. Freedom from desire does not mean rejecting pleasure or living as an ascetic. Marcus did not starve himself or deny beauty. It means enjoying what comes without being chained to it, using what fortune gives without worshipping it, being able to let go without collapse, to drink wine without needing wine, to enjoy company without clinging to company, to taste luxury without being owned by luxury. This is freedom. And this is the discipline Marcus trained within himself. In Rome, temptation was everywhere: banquets, games, wealth, flattery. An emperor could lose himself easily in indulgence, as many before him had. Yet Marcus reminded himself in his writings that pleasure is fleeting, that possessions are temporary, that desire blinds the mind. He wrote to strip away illusion. He looked at fine food and reminded himself it is only dead fish, dead bird, fermented grape. He looked at fame and reminded himself it is only the breath of others, soon forgotten. He looked at luxury and reminded himself it is only material, destined to decay. By seeing things as they truly are, not as desire paints them, he freed himself from their grip. Now think about modern life. You are surrounded by temptations Marcus could never imagine. Screens flood your eyes with images of wealth, beauty, status. Advertisements whisper that happiness is one purchase away. Social media shouts that your worth depends on comparison. Desire multiplies, disguised as need. But the truth remains the same. If you cannot say no, you are not free. Freedom is not owning more. Freedom is needing less. Marcus would ask you, what do you truly need to live? Food, shelter, basic comfort, yes. But beyond that, how much of what you chase is truly necessary, and how much is only desire enslaving you? He would remind you that the body requires little, the soul requires virtue, and desire requires endless chains. To live well, strip away the unnecessary. Simplify. Choose what aligns with reason, not impulse. Choose what strengthens character, not what weakens it. This discipline does not mean life becomes dull. On the contrary, freedom from desire makes life richer. When you are not enslaved by cravings, you can enjoy what you have fully. A simple meal becomes satisfying, a moment of silence becomes peace, a friendship becomes precious. Desire blinds us to what is already ours. Freedom from desire opens our eyes to abundance in simplicity. Marcus lived this truth, finding joy not in palaces, but in the stillness of the mind. But this freedom must be practiced. It will not come naturally. The mind will whisper, just one more, just one more, just one more. Marcus knew this whisper well, which is why he returned to his journal daily. He wrote to himself reminders of mortality, reminders of simplicity, reminders of the trap of desire. He knew that to remain free, he had to rehearse freedom. And so must we. Each day we must pause and ask, is this a need or is this a chain? Does this strengthen me or does this enslave me? Imagine a man who owns everything yet is restless, anxious, never content. Now imagine a man who owns little yet is calm, steady, grateful. Who is freer? Marcus answered this question with his life. Though he ruled an empire, he sought freedom not in conquest, not in wealth, but in mastering his own desires. That mastery is available to you, no matter your station. You need not be emperor to live as free as one. So let this lesson guide you. Stop chasing endlessly what never satisfies. Look at desire in the face and strip away its illusions. See things as they are, not as your cravings paint them. Practice temperance. practice restraint, and discover the freedom Marcus discovered, the freedom of needing little, the freedom of being content, the freedom of owning yourself. And now, I invite you to seal this truth with a declaration. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I am free from desire." Let it remind you that freedom is not given by fortune, but chosen by discipline. Let it anchor you as it anchored Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled not only Rome, but himself. Lesson 4. The shortness of life. Marcus Aurelius ruled with the constant shadow of death at his side. The Antonine Plague swept through his empire, claiming millions of lives. War claimed soldiers, famine claimed families, betrayal claimed trust. He buried children of his own. He lived with the awareness that every breath could be the last, that every meeting could be a farewell. And yet, instead of drowning in despair, Marcus used the shortness of life as fuel for clarity. He did not run from mortality. He faced it daily, reminding himself that to live well meant to live now, to waste no time, to use each moment as if it were the final one. In his meditations, Marcus wrote again and again about the fleeting nature of existence. He reminded himself that soon he would be gone, soon everyone he knew would be gone, soon the very empire he ruled would fade into dust. This was not meant to depress him, it was meant to sharpen him. To him, the shortness of life was not a curse but a teacher. Death taught him to strip away the trivial, to focus on virtue, to act with urgency, to live according to reason and not be distracted by vanity. For Marcus, the thought of death was not fear but discipline. Think of how often you live as though life were endless. You postpone dreams, you delay forgiveness, you waste time in distraction. You imagine there will always be more days, more chances, more tomorrows. But Marcus whispers across centuries, tomorrow is not promised. This day, this hour, this breath, these are certain. Use them well because they are already slipping through your hands. The shortness of life can either terrify or liberate you. For those who cling to pleasure, it is terror, because pleasure will fade. For those who cling to possessions, it is terror, because possessions will decay. For those who cling to reputation, it is terror, because reputation will vanish. But for the Stoic, the shortness of life is liberation, because it teaches us to cling only to what cannot be taken: virtue, character, wisdom. When you live for virtue, death cannot rob you. When you live for possessions, death takes everything. Marcus Aurelius was emperor, yet he reminded himself constantly that emperors die as surely as slaves. Kings, generals, poets, peasants, all meet the same end. And if death is certain, then why live as if immortality could be purchased? Why waste time on anger, greed, vanity, resentment? He asked himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Such words are not meant to paralyze, but to awaken. If this were your last day, would you waste it in pettiness, in arguments, in endless scrolling of distraction? Or would you live it with dignity, with gratitude, with courage? The shortness of life demands an answer. Modern life blinds us to this truth. We surround ourselves with noise and distraction, pretending that time is infinite. We treat days as disposable, hours as cheap, minutes as meaningless. Yet nothing is more valuable. Time is the only currency that once spent cannot be replaced. Marcus saw this clearly. He reminded himself that life is not short if used well. It becomes short only when wasted. The tragedy is not that we die, but that we never truly live before dying. Think of the small quarrels you have carried, the grudges you have fed, the fears you have allowed to control you. Each of these is theft. They steal hours, days, years. And for what? None of them survive death. Marcus would urge you to let them go. Release anger, because it consumes the time you could spend in peace. Release envy, because it blinds you to the blessings already in your hand. Release procrastination, because it cheats you of today while promising a tomorrow that may never come. Marcus did not fear death because he had trained his soul to see it as natural. Just as a leaf falls from a tree, just as a flame burns out, so does human life pass. Why resist what is written into the nature of the universe? To him, death was not an enemy, but a companion, reminding him of urgency, clarity, and humility. He knew that when his time came, no crown, no power, no army would delay it. And so he lived each day as a gift, already half spent. Now ask yourself, how would you live if you remembered daily that life is short? Would you waste less time on distraction? Would you speak more kindly to those you love? Would you dare more boldly to pursue what matters? This is not a call to panic, but to presence. To live as Marcus lived is to live awake, not asleep in the illusion of endless time. To wake each morning and say, today is enough. Today I will live according to virtue. Today I will not waste what cannot be returned. The shortness of life is not meant to make you despair. It is meant to make you grateful. Grateful that you have this breath, this chance, this moment. Grateful that you are alive when so many are gone. Grateful that you can choose your response now in this second without waiting for fortune to favor you. Gratitude grows naturally when you see the brevity of life, because you understand that nothing is owed. Everything is a gift. Marcus Aurelius left behind not monuments or palaces that outlasted centuries. Most crumbled into ruin. What he left was wisdom carved into words, words that survive because they touch the eternal part of human life. He knew his empire would fade, but he hoped his reflections might guide others long after his death. And so they do, because the truth he lived, that life is short, that virtue alone matters, that time is sacred, is as urgent today as it was 2 millennia ago. So let us carry this lesson. Let us remember that the measure of life is not in years, but in how we use them. Let us strip away distraction, release resentment, and live each day as if it were the last gift of the universe. For one day, it will be. And let us seal this truth not in thought but in action. Leave a comment with the phrase, "Life is short." Let it remind you daily to live with urgency, with clarity, with gratitude. For the shortness of life is not a curse, but the greatest teacher, and Marcus Aurelius was its most faithful student. Lesson 3. The discipline of action. Marcus Aurelius was not a man of idle philosophy. He did not write in his journal to escape life, but to prepare for it. For him, thought without action was nothing, reflection without practice was emptiness, and philosophy without discipline was a shadow. To be Stoic was not to sit in endless debate about truth, but to embody truth in the choices of each day. Marcus knew that words are easy and action is difficult, and he chose the difficult path. This is why his lessons endure, because they are not theories to be admired, but disciplines to be lived. As Emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius faced constant pressure. Armies demanded leadership, senators demanded decisions, citizens demanded stability. He could not afford to hide behind excuses, to wait endlessly for the perfect moment, to drown himself in hesitation. He acted, and he acted with reason, with justice, with courage. He reminded himself that a man is measured not by what he intends, but by what he does. The discipline of action was his creed, the refusal to let life slip away in delay. Consider how often you fail not because of lack of knowledge, but because of lack of action. You know what is right. You know what should be done. Yet fear delays you, comfort seduces you, doubt paralyzes you. Marcus would remind you that hesitation is a thief of life. Each day wasted in inaction is a day surrendered to weakness. He wrote to himself, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. To him, the discipline of action was not about rushing blindly, but about refusing to waste the time that fate has given. Action for Marcus was rooted in virtue. It was not about chasing pleasure or ambition, but about doing what reason and justice demanded. He did not act for applause. He acted because the universe called him to play his role well. He compared life to a play. You may not choose the length of the script, but you can choose how well you perform your part. Each action, no matter how small, was a chance to live in harmony with nature, to be patient when patience was hard, to be courageous when courage was demanded, to be just when injustice tempted, to be disciplined when indulgence called. Modern life tempts us to delay. We tell ourselves, tomorrow I will begin. Tomorrow I will change. Tomorrow I will live with discipline. But Marcus would shake his head. Tomorrow is not yours. Only this moment is. Do not wait for the perfect conditions. They will never come. Act now. Act with what you have, where you are, with the strength available to you. The discipline of action is the discipline of seizing today, of refusing to let fear or laziness rob you of the only time you own, the present. But Marcus also knew that action must be guided, not reckless. Action without wisdom is chaos. Discipline means aligning action with reason, ensuring that what you do serves the good of your soul and the good of others. To act in anger is not discipline. To act in greed is not discipline. To act in haste without clarity is not discipline. True discipline of action is calm, steady, aligned with virtue. Like an archer who does not fire wildly, but with focus, patience, and purpose, the Stoic acts not to appear busy, but to live rightly. Think of the times you avoided action. You delayed the hard conversation. You postponed the decision. You waited for courage instead of choosing it. Each time, the weight grew heavier, the burden greater, the opportunity smaller. Action delayed is often action lost. Marcus practiced reminding himself that life is short, that hesitation wastes what cannot be returned, and that even emperors do not know if tomorrow will come. This urgency did not make him frantic, but focused. He acted when it mattered, and that is why his legacy is not empty words, but a life of endurance. The discipline of action applies not only to grand decisions, but to small ones. Rising from bed when comfort begs you to remain, speaking truth when silence tempts you, choosing kindness when anger burns. Each action is small, but together they build a character of strength. Marcus compared life to a mosaic made of countless small stones. One stone may seem insignificant, but together they form the image of your soul. Do not despise small actions. Each is a chance to practice virtue, and here lies the challenge for you. Will you live only in thought, or will you act? Will you delay until death robs you of time, or will you choose now? The Stoic path is not to admire wisdom, but to embody it. To read Marcus Aurelius is not enough. To quote him is not enough. To act as he acted, with reason and virtue in the face of fear, that is the discipline that transforms. So let us carry this lesson. Do not wait. Do not postpone. Do not allow fear, laziness, or doubt to chain you. Choose action. Choose to do what is right. Not tomorrow, but now. For the time given to you is already passing, and only action aligned with virtue can make it meaningful. And let us seal this truth with a declaration. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I choose action." Let it remind you daily that life is not lived in intention but in action. Let it guide you as it guided Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who knew that words fade, but deeds endure. Lesson 2. The unity of all things. Marcus Aurelius lived with the constant awareness that he was a part of something infinitely larger than himself. He was emperor, but he did not see himself as standing above the universe. He saw himself as one thread in the vast fabric of existence, one wave in the endless sea of time. His meditations return again and again to this truth. Everything is connected. Everything is interwoven. Everything belongs to one great whole. To forget this unity is to live in ignorance. To remember it is to live in harmony. For Marcus, the unity of all things was not just a philosophical abstraction, it was a daily practice. When betrayal wounded him, he reminded himself that even the betrayer was part of the same universe, bound by the same nature, acting according to the same human frailties. When plague ravaged his empire, he reminded himself that disease was not an enemy, but a natural function of the world, part of the cycle of life and death. When fortune lifted him to the highest power, he reminded himself that even an emperor is but dust, destined to dissolve back into the elements from which he came. The unity of all things humbled him, steadied him, and taught him to accept life without bitterness. Think of how often you live as if you were the center of the universe. You take offense as if the world should bend to your expectations. You despair as if your suffering were unique. You chase ambition as if history will pause to admire your victories. But Marcus knew the truth. The universe is vast, and each of us is small. The stars do not stop for our grief. Time does not pause for our desires. Billions have lived and died before us. Billions will live and die after us. We are threads in a tapestry too large to see. To fight this truth is to suffer. To accept it is to find peace. The unity of all things also teaches responsibility. If we are all part of one body, then the good of one is connected to the good of all. Marcus reminded himself that injustice to another is injustice to himself, because to harm another limb of the body is to harm the whole. This perspective shaped his sense of justice. He did not rule for his own pleasure, but for the welfare of his people, because he understood that emperor and citizen alike are parts of the same organism. To live selfishly, to exploit others, to act with cruelty, is to forget that unity and to harm oneself in the process. In modern life, we forget this unity daily. We see ourselves as isolated individuals, competing, comparing, dividing. We imagine that our lives are separate from the lives of others, that our actions affect only ourselves. But Marcus would remind us, every choice ripples outward. Every act of kindness strengthens the body of humanity. Every act of cruelty weakens it. You are not alone, nor are you independent. You are part of the same whole, bound to the same destiny, subject to the same laws of nature. This truth can free you from bitterness. When someone wrongs you, you can choose to see them not as an enemy, but as a fellow human, acting out of ignorance or weakness, just as you have done in your own life. When suffering strikes, you can remind yourself that it is not personal. It is the nature of existence. To be born is to suffer. To live is to change. To die is to return. You are not singled out. You are participating in the same cycle that has carried every human being who ever lived. To resist it is to fight reality. To accept it is to live with calm. The unity of all things also brings perspective to ambition and pride. Marcus reminded himself constantly that soon he would be gone, that all of Rome would be gone, that even the greatest names of history fade into silence. Why then chase endless fame? Why cling to possessions? Why be consumed by pride? If you are part of the whole, then your task is not to dominate it, but to fulfill your role within it. Just as a hand serves the body by grasping and the eye serves by seeing, you serve the universe by living with virtue, by contributing your part, by acting with reason. That is enough. Think of a drop of water falling into the ocean. Alone it is fragile, fleeting. In the ocean it is eternal, part of something larger. Marcus saw himself and all humanity in the same way. Each of us is a drop, brief and small, but together we are the ocean of existence. To cling to separateness is fear. To embrace unity is strength. Now reflect on your own life. How often do you fight reality because you forget unity? You demand permanence in a world of change. You demand control in a universe governed by laws beyond you. You demand that life revolve around your desires. And so you suffer. But if you could remember that you are part of a whole, you could release much of this burden. You could accept change as natural. You could accept loss as part of the cycle. You could accept death as the return of your elements to the universe. Nothing is stolen from you because nothing was ever truly yours. All was borrowed, all was shared, all belonged to the unity of all things. Marcus Aurelius did not solve the universe by mastering its secrets. He solved it by surrendering to its order. He realized that peace does not come from bending the universe to your will, but from aligning your will with the universe. The river flows whether you rage or not. The stars move whether you approve or not. Life and death continue whether you cling or not. Wisdom is to stop resisting, to see yourself as part of the current, and to flow with it in harmony. So let this lesson guide you. Remember daily that you are part of a larger whole. Treat others not as obstacles, but as fellow limbs of the same body. Accept change not as tragedy, but as nature. Face death not as an enemy, but as a return. See your desires, your fears, your ambitions in perspective as small ripples in a vast sea, and find peace not in isolation, but in unity. And let us seal this truth with a declaration. Leave a comment with the phrase, "All is one." Let it remind you that the universe is not against you, nor separate from you. You belong to it, and it belongs to you. This is the lesson Marcus Aurelius lived, and this is the unity that frees the soul from fear. Lesson 1. Mastery of the mind. Marcus Aurelius ruled armies, senators, provinces, and an empire that stretched across continents. Yet he knew that all this power was fragile, temporary, and often an illusion. The only true power, the only kingdom that could not be taken from him, was mastery over his own mind. In his meditations, he reminded himself again and again that the mind is sovereign, that the mind alone can turn disaster into discipline, insult into indifference, suffering into strength. To master the mind is to master life, because all else is beyond control. Think of the storms that surrounded Marcus. War raged on the frontiers, plague decimated cities, betrayal crept through the Senate, even within his own family death struck without mercy. He could not prevent these things, but he could prevent himself from being ruled by fear, anger, or despair. He could control his thoughts, his judgments, his choices. This was his fortress. This was his empire. When the world outside collapsed, he retreated into the kingdom within, where no enemy could breach the walls. That is why his words still echo centuries later. They are not about conquering Rome, but about conquering the self. Now look at your own life. You do not rule Rome, but you face storms of another kind. Anxiety about the future, regret about the past, anger at injustice, fear of failure, desire that enslaves. These forces rule many people completely, reducing them to servants of impulse. But Marcus reminds you, you are not a slave unless you choose to be. You can choose your thoughts, you can choose your response, you can choose to rule your mind instead of being ruled by it. This mastery does not come easily. The mind is restless, pulled by emotion, clouded by illusion. Marcus knew this, which is why he wrote daily to discipline his thoughts. He trained his mind as one trains the body, with repetition, with patience, with endurance. He reminded himself that insults have no power unless accepted, that fear is imagination of the future, that pain is only sensation, that death is only change. Each reminder was a weapon, each reflection a shield. Slowly, through constant practice, he forged mastery over himself. Modern life demands the same discipline. The world screams for your attention. Screens flood your eyes with images, voices flood your ears with noise. Opinions flood your mind with confusion. If you do not master your mind, these forces will master it for you. They will tell you what to desire, what to fear, what to value, what to chase. You will drift, enslaved not by chains, but by distraction. Mastery of the mind is the only defense. To pause, to question, to separate truth from illusion, to choose clarity over chaos, that is the practice Marcus lived. Mastery of the mind also means mastery over desire. Marcus warned himself that pleasure is fleeting, that possessions are fragile, that reputation is nothing but the breath of others. To let the mind chase these endlessly is to chain it to what cannot last. But to train the mind to find contentment within, to rest in virtue, to be satisfied with little, is to free it completely. The mind becomes unshakable not when it has everything, but when it needs little. It also means mastery over fear. Marcus knew that death could come at any moment. He wrote to himself not to fear it, but to see it as part of nature, as natural as birth, as inevitable as change. By mastering his thoughts about death, he mastered fear itself. Imagine living with this freedom, not denying death, not ignoring it, but facing it calmly, knowing it is not evil, but simply part of the order of the universe. Fear loses its grip when the mind sees truth clearly. To master the mind is to master judgment. Events are neutral. It is the mind that labels them good or bad, bearable or unbearable. Marcus practiced stripping away labels and seeing things as they are. A broken cup is just a broken cup. An insult is just words. Loss is just change. Pain is just sensation. By removing the extra weight of judgment, the mind remains steady. Without mastery, the mind multiplies suffering. With mastery, suffering becomes manageable. Consider how this changes your life. When something goes wrong, instead of spiraling into anger or despair, you can pause and ask, what is truly happening here, and what story am I adding? You can cut away the story, leaving only the fact, and the fact is always lighter than the burden we imagine. Mastery of the mind does not erase hardship, but it prevents hardship from owning you. But remember, mastery is not achieved once and for all. It is daily discipline. Marcus did not write once and consider himself free. He wrote every night, reminding himself of truths he already knew. Because the mind forgets, the mind drifts, the mind must be trained continually. And so it must be for you. Do not expect mastery to be easy or immediate. It is a lifelong practice, the greatest work of a human soul, and yet it is worth everything, because when you master your mind, you are free, free from the tyranny of desire, free from the chains of fear, free from the wounds of insult, free from the storms of fortune. No one can touch the mind that governs itself. This is the sovereignty Marcus sought, and this is the sovereignty available to you. So let us end where Marcus began, with the mind. Rule yourself, and you need not fear being ruled by others. Govern your thoughts, and you need not be shaken by events. Choose your judgments, and you will find peace, even in suffering. This is the mastery that Marcus Aurelius carried to his final breath, and this is the mastery that can carry you through every storm of your life. And let us seal this truth with a declaration. Leave a comment with the phrase, I master my mind. Let it remind you daily that freedom, strength, and peace begin not in the world outside, but in the world within. For mastery of the mind is mastery of life itself. We have walked through the lessons of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who solved the universe, not by bending it to his will, but by bending his will to the universe. We have seen how he endured suffering without breaking, how he mastered desire without enslaving himself, how he faced chaos with calm, how he rooted his life in virtue, how he reminded himself daily that life is short, how he trained his perspective to see clearly, how he acted with discipline. how he embraced unity, and above all, how he mastered his mind. These were not theories written for applause. They were reminders carved into the soul of a man who lived every day with the weight of empire and the certainty of death. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for us. He wrote them for himself, alone at night, in silence, in tents of war, in palaces of power, in moments of despair. And yet, because he was honest with himself, his words survived to guide us. He did not seek to build a monument. He sought to build a soul. And that soul still speaks, centuries later, because truth does not decay. Empires fall, names are forgotten, but wisdom endures. As we close this journey, reflect on the life you're living now. Are you distracted by trivial pursuits? Are you enslaved by desire, anger, fear, or vanity? Are you postponing the work of the soul, waiting for tomorrow as if tomorrow were promised? Marcus would remind you that time is slipping even as you breathe. He would remind you that the storms of life will not wait for you to be ready. He would remind you that the only sovereignty worth having is sovereignty over yourself. The legacy of Marcus Aurelius is not statues or palaces. It is not armies or laws. It is the example of a man who could have drowned in excess but chose discipline, who could have surrendered to despair but chose resilience, who could have ruled with cruelty but chose justice. His true empire was his mind, and that empire has outlasted Rome. You too are called to rule such an empire. Your mind is your kingdom. Your thoughts are your citizens, your virtues are your laws. Govern them well, and no external storm will overthrow you. Think of the alternative. A life ruled by desire, tossed by fear, broken by every hardship. A life wasted in distraction, poisoned by resentment, enslaved by illusion. That is the life Marcus warned against, the life of those who never wake to the truth that freedom is internal. If you live without mastering your mind, the universe will rule you mercilessly. But if you choose to govern yourself, the universe cannot touch your soul. As we close, I ask you to imagine Marcus on his final days. The plague that had ravaged Rome had reached him. He knew his end was near. And yet, those around him said he met death with calm, with clarity, with peace. He had practiced all his life for that moment. Death was no stranger. It was the natural return of the body to the elements, the end of a role in the play of life. He had nothing to fear, because he had lived according to virtue, according to reason, according to the truth he had written in his heart. His empire ended, but his soul was free. This is the legacy he leaves you. Not to fear what is natural, not to chase what is fleeting, not to waste what is priceless. To live now, to live well, to live according to virtue. This is not a distant dream. It is a choice, one you can make today, in this moment. You do not need to be emperor to practice it. You need only to rule yourself. So I leave you with a challenge. Do not let these words remain as echoes in your mind. Take them into action. When fear rises, remember Marcus and choose courage. When desire tempts, remember Marcus and choose restraint. When chaos rages, remember Marcus and choose calm. When life seems unfair, remember Marcus and choose justice. And when you forget, as you surely will, return again tomorrow, as Marcus did every night, and remind yourself once more. Philosophy is not perfection, it is practice. And let us seal this journey together with one final act. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I rule myself." Let it be your declaration that you will not live as a slave to impulse, to desire, to fear, but as a sovereign over your own mind. Let it remind you daily that the empire of the self is the only one that endures. Marcus Aurelius was called emperor, philosopher, warrior, but his greatest title is one you can share with him, master of the self. That is the legacy he leaves you. That is the empire you are called to rule, and if you rule it well, you too will have solved the universe.